What happens when a quiet, thoughtful actor known for his restraint is pushed, gently at first, then relentlessly, on live television, until the tension becomes impossible to ignore. Before anyone on the panel realizes what they are witnessing, before the audience even understands why the air suddenly feels heavier, the moment is already slipping out of control. And if you're watching this unfold, stay with us, subscribe to Talk Narrative, like this video, and comment as we dive straight into one of the most uncomfortable talk show moments you didn't see coming. The studio lights are warm, almost forgiving, washing the familiar table in a soft glow that suggests safety, civility, conversation. The kind of place where disagreements are meant to feel polite, where sharp questions are dulled by smiles and laughter. The audience applauds on cue as Mark Ruffalo walks out, waving modestly, his grin relaxed, shoulders loose. He looks like someone who expects a conversation, not a confrontation. Whoopi Goldberg turns toward him with that practiced ease, half host, half guardian of the table. She welcomes him, jokes lightly about his schedule, his latest project, the long arc of a career that's earned him goodwill across generations. Mark laughs, nodding, thanking her. He sits down, crosses one ankle over the other, folds his hands. Calm, open, ready. At first, everything goes exactly as planned. They talk about acting, about the weight of fame, about balancing public expectations with personal truth. Mark answers thoughtfully, his words careful but warm. The audience murmurs approvingly at his sincerity. Whoopi listens, nodding, but there's something in her posture that suggests she's waiting. Waiting for the turn. When it comes, it's subtle. So, Whoopi says, leaning back slightly, her voice casual, "You've always been pretty outspoken about the things you believe in." Mark smiles again, smaller this time. "I try to be honest, yeah. And honest can make people uncomfortable," she continues, eyes fixed on him now. "Do you think you ever go too far?" There it is. Not an accusation, yet. Just a question, framed like curiosity. Mark shifts in his chair, uncrosses his ankle, plants both feet on the floor. He inhales before answering. "I think discomfort isn't always a bad thing," he says. "Sometimes it's how conversations start." A safe answer. Diplomatic. The audience claps lightly. Whoopi nods, but she doesn't let it land. Sure, but there's a difference between starting a conversation and shutting people out. Some folks feel like you talk at them, not with them. The air changes. Not dramatically. Not enough for casual viewers to catch it immediately. But Mark does. His eyebrows knit together just a fraction. He glances down at the table, then back up. "I don't think that's my intention," he replies. "I'm just sharing my perspective." "But intention isn't impact," Whoopi says, sharper now. "You know that." The audience quiets. No applause this time. Mark nods slowly, buying time. Inside, something tightens. He came here to talk about his work, to engage, maybe even to disagree, but not to be put on trial. Not like this. Not with the cameras rolling and millions watching. "I agree," he says carefully. "Impact matters. That's why I listen when people push back." Whoopi leans forward. "Do you really? Because sometimes it feels like you dismiss criticism as people just not getting it." A ripple moves through the crowd. A few heads turn. Someone coughs. The panelists exchange quick glances, sensing the shift. Mark's jaw flexes. He keeps his voice even, but there's less warmth in it now. "I don't dismiss criticism. I just don't believe all criticism is offered in good faith." That's the first crack. The moment where his guard lowers just enough for frustration to show through. Whoopi raises an eyebrow. "And who gets to decide that?" Mark hesitates. For half a second, he looks like he might laugh it off. Instead, he straightens his back. "I think everyone decides for themselves," he says. "Including me." The words hang there, heavier than he intended. The audience murmurs again, louder this time. Whoopi doesn't smile. That sounds convenient. Now the tension is undeniable. Mark feels heat rise in his chest, not anger exactly, but something close, an old familiar feeling of being misunderstood, boxed in, talked over. He presses his lips together, then releases a slow breath. "I'm not trying to be convenient," he says. "I'm trying to be honest." "But honesty without accountability can look like arrogance," Whoopi replies. There it is. The line that turns conversation into confrontation. Mark blinks. Once. Twice. His shoulders tense, his hands tightening together on the table. The audience is completely silent now, caught between curiosity and discomfort. I don't think standing by what you believe is arrogance, he says, voice lower. I think it's integrity. Whoopi shakes her head slightly. Not when it ignores other people's realities. The words land hard. Mark feels the familiar pressure of being asked to represent more than himself, to answer for movements, for narratives, for conflicts bigger than a single person. He didn't come prepared for this, not emotionally, not strategically. I'm not ignoring anyone, he says, a sharper edge creeping into his tone. I'm talking about my own experiences. And yet you speak like your experience is universal, Whoopi counters. A few gasps from the audience. Someone whispers. A camera zooms in on Mark's face, catching the tension in his eyes, the way his jaw sets. That's not fair, he says, finally letting frustration seep through. I've never claimed that. Whoopi holds his gaze. Then maybe you should be clearer. For a moment, Mark considers backing down. He can feel the expectation, to soften, to deflect, to apologize just enough to keep things smooth. He's done it before. He knows how. But something stops him. He thinks of all the times he's been told to shrink his voice, to make his beliefs more palatable, to smile through discomfort so others don't have to feel it. He exhales slowly, grounding himself. I am being clear, he says. I care deeply about these issues, and I'm allowed to speak about them without being painted as dismissive or arrogant. The audience reacts instantly, some applause, some uneasy shifting. The pain lists look tense now, aware that the moment has tipped into something live, something unpredictable. Whoopi's voice hardens just slightly. And we're allowed to question you on it. I'm not saying you aren't, Mark replies. I'm saying there's a difference between questioning and cornering. That word, cornering, hits the table like a dropped glass. Whoopi leans back, lips pressed together. For a split second, there's silence. Real silence. The kind that makes viewers lean closer to their screens. Mark feels his heart pounding, his pulse loud in his ears. He wonders if he's gone too far. He wonders if this will be clipped, replayed, dissected. He wonders if he should have just smiled and nodded. But it's too late now. Whoopi finally speaks. No one's cornering you, Mark. It doesn't feel that way, he says quietly. The softness of his voice only makes the moment heavier. The audience doesn't know whether to clap, to gasp, or to stay still. The tension sits between them, unresolved, charged. And as the cameras keep rolling, one thing is clear. This interview is no longer about promotion or polite debate. It's become something else entirely. Something personal. Something raw. And it's only just beginning. The silence doesn't last long, but it feels like it stretches on forever. Mark can hear the faint hum of the studio lights, the shuffle of someone in the audience adjusting in their seat. He keeps his gaze steady, though inside his thoughts are racing. He knows this moment. His lived versions of it before. Rooms where the tone shifts and suddenly you're not a guest anymore. You're a position. A symbol. A problem to be managed. Whoopi breaks the pause with a measured breath. Mark, she says, her voice calmer now but no less firm. This table is about conversation. And conversation means pushback. Mark nods slowly. I understand that. Do you? She asks. Because when you say you feel cornered, it suggests you don't want to be challenged. He shakes his head immediately. That's not what I'm saying. Sunny leans in slightly, sensing the friction. Then what are you saying? Mark turns toward her, grateful for the shift but aware it could cut either way. I'm saying that sometimes the framing matters. If the assumption is that I'm speaking from arrogance or ignorance, then the conversation starts from the wrong place. Joy raises an eyebrow. But that assumption doesn't come out of nowhere. Mark exhales, a slow, controlled release. He can feel his chest tightening again. I know, and I'm willing to talk about that. I just want it to be a conversation, not a verdict. A few claps ripple through the audience, tentative, unsure. Someone starts, then stops. Whoopi folds her hands together. Okay, she says. Then let's talk about it. You've been vocal about issues that affect a lot of people who don't have your platform. Some of them feel spoken for, not spoken with. How do you respond to that? There it is again. The careful wording. The weight of representation. Mark looks down at the table, the glossy surface reflecting his face back at him, more tense than he realized. He thinks about the people who've written to him, thanking him. He thinks about the ones who've criticized him, sometimes harshly. He thinks about how none of that nuance fits neatly into a daytime talk show segment. I don't claim to speak for anyone, he says finally. I speak as myself, as someone who's learning, like everyone else. Whoopi tilts her head. But when you speak, people listen. That comes with responsibility. I know, Mark replies, a little quicker than before. And I take that seriously. Then why not say that more? She presses. Why not lead with humility instead of certainty? That word again. Certainty. Mark feels a flash of irritation. Because caring deeply doesn't mean I'm certain about everything, he says. It means I'm committed. Joy lets out a small laugh, not unkind but pointed. Commitment can sound a lot like certainty on social media. The audience chuckles nervously. Mark forces a smile that doesn't quite reach his eyes. Social media isn't real life. Whoopi's eyes narrow just a touch. But it shapes real perceptions. Yes, Mark says, his voice firm now, and so do shows like this. The implication hangs in the air. A few audience members gasp softly. Sunnis' eyes widen. Joy leans back in her chair. Whoopi holds his gaze. Are you saying we're misrepresenting you? I'm saying moments like this get clipped without context, Mark replies. And suddenly I'm a headline instead of a person. The tension spikes again. The control room feels it. The panel feels it. The audience feels it. Whoopi doesn't raise her voice. She doesn't need to. That's part of being a public figure. Mark nods, but there's resignation in it now. I know. That doesn't mean it doesn't get exhausting. His honesty catches the room off guard. The audience quiets, leaning in again, not for drama now, but for something more fragile. I didn't come here to fight, he continues, softer. I came here to talk. But it feels like I'm being asked to defend my right to speak at all. Sunny jumps in, trying to recalibrate. I don't think anyone's saying that. It feels that way, Mark replies. He stops himself, presses his fingers together. At least, sometimes. Whoopi sighs, the tension etched into her face. Mark, nobody's questioning your right to speak. We're questioning how you use that voice. Mark looks at her, really looks at her. He sees not an adversary, but someone who's spent decades navigating public scrutiny, public outrage, public misunderstanding. He wonders if she sees the same in him, or if she sees something else entirely. Then help me understand what you want from me, he says. Because I'm listening. The sincerity in his voice changes the energy again. It's subtle, but it's there. The audience shifts, sensing a potential turning point. Whoopi pauses. For the first time since the tension began, she seems to consider her words carefully. I want acknowledgement, she says. That sometimes passion can overshadow perspective. Mark nods slowly. That's fair. And that sometimes, she continues, when people push back, it's not an attack, it's an invitation to grow. He absorbs that, feels the truth in it. I agree, he says. But growth goes both ways. A beat. What do you mean? Whoopi asks. I mean, Mark says, choosing his words with care, that sometimes the pushback comes with assumptions that aren't fair either, and that can shut people down. The audience murmurs again, divided. Some nodding, some frowning. Joy leans forward. But Mark, if multiple people feel the same way about your tone, doesn't that say something? Yes, he replies. It says I need to listen. And I do. But it doesn't automatically mean I'm wrong for caring out loud. Whoopi studies him. You don't think there's a line? There is, Mark says immediately. And I think I'm constantly trying to find it. His voice cracks just slightly on the last word. It's not dramatic, but it's real. The cameras catch it. The audience feels it. For a moment, no one speaks. Then Whoopi leans back, her expression unreadable. All right, she says. Let's take a breath. The audience exhales collectively, laughter breaking the tension like a release valve. But the calm doesn't fully return. Because beneath the surface, something has shifted. This isn't a simple disagreement anymore. It's a collision of expectations about who gets to speak, how they're allowed to feel, and what accountability really looks like when everyone's watching. Mark sits back in his chair, heart still racing. He knows this isn't over. He can feel it in the way the panelists glance at one another, in the way the audience watches him now, not just as an actor, but as a man navigating a public reckoning in real time. And as the cameras keep rolling, the question lingers in the air, unanswered and uncomfortable. Is he being challenged, or is he being pushed past his breaking point? Either way, the tension isn't easing. It's building. The breath Whoopi suggests taking never quite arrives. The studio moves on the surface, camera angles adjust, Someone off-screen signals a transition, but the emotional current stays charged, humming just beneath every word. Mark can feel it in his shoulders, still tense despite his effort to relax them. He rolls them back slightly, a subtle attempt to reset, but the tightness doesn't leave. Whoopi glances down at her notes, then back up. "Let me ask you something directly," she says. "When people tell you that your passion feels overwhelming, do you hear that as criticism or rejection?" The question lands differently. It's quieter, more precise. Mark blinks, caught off guard. He hadn't prepared for introspection on live television, not like this. He opens his mouth, then closes it again, buying himself a second. "I think," he says slowly, "it depends on how it's said." Sonny nods. "That's fair. But sometimes," Mike continues, "it feels like rejection before I even get a chance to explain." Joy crosses her arms. "Or maybe it feels like rejection because you're used to being agreed with." The audience reacts instantly, half laughter, half sharp intake of breath. Mark turns toward Joy, his expression tightening again. "That's not true," he says, firmer now. "I'm disagreed with all the time." Joy shrugs. "Online, sure. But in rooms like this." Mark feels the familiar frustration bubble back up. He leans forward, forearms resting on the table now, posture more engaged, more defensive. "I don't choose the rooms I'm invited into," he says. "I show up and try to be honest." "And honesty can still be self-serving," Joy replies. Sonny winces slightly, sensing the escalation. "Joy!" "No, let him answer," Whoopi says, holding up a hand. Mark's jaw tightens. He can hear his own heartbeat again, loud and insistent. He forces himself not to interrupt, not to react too quickly. Years of acting training kick in, not to perform, but to pause. "I don't think caring about something deeply is self-serving," he says. "If it were, I'd stay quiet. That would be easier." A murmur of agreement rolls through part of the audience. Someone claps. Someone else shakes their head. Whoopi watches him closely. "But silence can be easier for you," she says. "You have the option to step back. Others don't." The words sting because they are not entirely wrong. Mark nods once. "That's true. And I try to remember that." "Try," Whoopi repeats. "Yes," he says. "Try. Because I'm human." There's a flicker of something, sympathy, perhaps, in Whoopi's expression, but it doesn't soften her stance. Being human doesn't exempt you from impact. "I know," Mark replies, a little more sharply than he intended. He catches himself, lowers his voice. "I know." The audience feels the tug-of-war now, the push and pull between accountability and exhaustion. This isn't about one comment or one belief anymore. It's about how much space someone is allowed to take up before being told it's too much. Sonny leans in again. "Can I ask, do you ever worry that your voice drowns out others?" Mark turns to her, grateful for the neutrality in her tone. "Yes," he says without hesitation. "All the time." Joy looks surprised. "Really?" "Yes," Mark says. "That's why I second-guess myself constantly. That's why moments like this hit harder than you might think." The vulnerability catches the room off guard. The audience quiets again, leaning in. "You're seeing a few minutes of a conversation," he continues, gesturing subtly around him. "But for me, this is years of trying to get it right. And still being told I'm failing." Whoopi studies him. "No one's saying you're failing." "It feels like that sometimes," Mark says, and this time there's no edge in it, just fatigue. A long pause follows. The kind that producers usually hate. But no one rushes to fill it. Joy shifts in her seat. "Mark, I don't think anyone doubts your sincerity. But sincerity doesn't always translate well when there's power involved." Mark nods slowly. "I agree." "Then why push back so hard when that's pointed out?" Joy asks. "Because," Mark says, then stops. He exhales. "Because it hurts to be told that the thing you're trying to do right is the thing causing harm." The honesty in his voice is undeniable now. A few audience members nod, visibly moved. Whoopi softens her tone just a fraction. "Pain doesn't mean the conversation is wrong." "No," Mark agrees. "But pain can make it harder to hear." Sonny interjects gently. "So what would help?" Mark thinks about that. Really thinks. He looks down at his hands again, unclenches them. "Context," he says. "Grace. The assumption that I'm trying, even when I mess up." Whoopi leans back, folding her arms loosely. "And what about the people who don't feel they get that same grace?" Mark meets her gaze. They deserve it too. The simplicity of the answer hangs there, undeniable. Joy sighs. This is the problem, though. Everyone thinks they are trying. That may be true, Mark replies. But that doesn't mean we stop trying to understand each other. A beat. The audience starts to clap, slow at first, then building. It's not thunderous applause, but it's steady, supportive. Not for a win, but for the effort. Whoopi raises a hand slightly, letting it die down. Let me ask you one last thing in this vein, she says. Do you think there's ever a point where stepping back is the right choice? Mark doesn't answer immediately. He considers the question, the weight of it. Yes, he says finally. And I think knowing when to step back is just as important as knowing when to speak. Do you know when that is? Whoopi asks. Mark hesitates. I'm still learning. The honesty disarms the room again. Even Joy gives a small nod. For a moment, it seems like the tension might finally ease. The edges soften. The conversation feels closer to resolution than confrontation. But then Whoopi adds, because from where I'm sitting, it sometimes feels like you haven't learned yet. The words aren't cruel, but they are firm, and they reopen everything Mark thought they'd just closed. He inhales sharply through his nose, eyes flicking down, then back up. The fatigue returns, heavier now. Maybe I haven't, he says. But I'm here, having this conversation, taking the heat. And that counts for something, Sonny says quickly. Mark nods. I hope so. Whoopi looks at him for a long moment. The studio is quiet again, the audience waiting, the cameras locked on their faces. This isn't about winning, Whoopi says finally. It's about responsibility. I know, Mark replies. And I take that seriously, even when it doesn't look like it. The silence that follows is different from before. Less sharp, more reflective, but still unresolved. Because as the show moves forward, as the conversation shifts toward other topics, the tension doesn't disappear, it lingers. In the glances exchanged, in the careful wording, in the awareness that something real just happened, something messy and human and unscripted. Mark leans back in his chair again, trying to steady his breathing. He knows people are already reacting, tweeting, clipping, choosing sides. And as the cameras roll on, one truth becomes unavoidable. This wasn't just a difficult interview. It was a reckoning unfolding in real time. And the fallout hasn't even begun. The segment moves on, but the room never quite resets. From the outside, it looks like a normal transition, new questions, lighter topics, a forced chuckle here and there. But inside the studio, something fragile has cracked, and everyone can feel it. Mark answers the next question politely, professionally, but the ease from the beginning of the interview never returns. His smiles are slower now. His pause is longer. His present, but guarded. The audience senses it too. Applause comes a half-second late. Laughter sounds thinner. People aren't just watching anymore, they are processing. Whoopi steers the conversation with practiced control, but even she seems aware that the earlier exchange changed the temperature of the room. She doesn't revisit it directly. Instead, she keeps things moving, keeping the show intact. That's her job. But the moment has already escaped the studio. Backstage, producers exchange looks. One of them glances at a monitor where live comments are already streaming faster than they can be read. Someone mutters, "This is gonna blow up." Mark feels it before he sees it. That subtle shift when you know something has followed you beyond the room. He straightens his jacket when the interview wraps, stands as the audience applauds, waves again, still gracious, still composed. But his eyes betray him. There's relief, yes, but there's also weight. Whoopi thanks him, her voice warm but measured. Their hug is brief, polite, respectful. Neither lingers. As Mark walks offstage, the applause fades behind him. The lights dim, and suddenly, the noise is gone. In the hallway, away from the cameras, he exhales deeply for the first time in what feels like an hour. He rubs his hands together, then runs one through his hair. The adrenaline drains, leaving exhaustion in its wake. He doesn't think he said anything wrong, but he also knows that won't matter. By the time he reaches his dressing room, the clips are already live. Short, sharp edits. His words pulled from context. Whoopi's questions framed as confrontational, or justified, depending on the account posting them. Headlines start forming in real time. Mark Ruffalo gets defensive on live TV. Whoopi Goldberg pushes back, Mark Ruffalo bristles. Awkward tension erupts on The View. Social media splits instantly. Some praise him for staying calm under pressure, for showing vulnerability, for refusing to shrink. They call him honest, human, brave. Others accuse him of tone deafness, of centering himself, of not listening enough. They dissect his pauses, his posture, the moment his voice tightened. They replay it over and over, slowing it down, assigning intention to every breath. Inside the studio, the panel finishes the show. Once the camera is cut, the energy shifts again, looser, but not light. Joy shakes her head slightly, muttering something under her breath. Sunny gathers her notes, thoughtful. Whoopi stays seated for a moment longer than usual, staring at the table. She's been here before. She knows how these moments echo. Later that day, she addresses it briefly on air, measured, composed. She says conversations like these matter. That discomfort isn't the enemy. That accountability and compassion have to exist in the same space. It satisfies some, infuriates others. Mark doesn't post immediately. He sits with it, reads some comments, avoids others. He thinks about what he could have said differently. He thinks about what he meant. He thinks about how quickly nuance disappears once the moment belongs to the internet. That night, long after the trending topics shift, he finally writes something. It's not defensive. It's not apologetic. It's reflective. Conversations are hard, it reads. Especially when they are public. I'm still learning. I'm still listening. And I believe we grow by staying in the room, even when it's uncomfortable. The reactions pour in again. Some call it growth. Others call it damage control. No one fully agrees. And maybe that's the point. Because what happened on that stage wasn't a viral stunt or a manufactured feud. It was a collision between expectation and emotion, between responsibility and exhaustion, between two people who both believe deeply in what they are saying. And that's why it lingers. Days later, clips are still circulating. Commentary videos rack up millions of views. Body language experts weigh in. Think pieces dissect every exchange. Viewers argue in comment sections, choosing sides, projecting their own experiences onto the moment. Some see a man pushed too far. Others see a man being held accountable. Most see a reflection of a larger tension, one that doesn't resolve neatly, one that doesn't end when the cameras turn off. Mark goes back to work. Whoopi goes back to the table. The show moves on. But the moment stays. Because it wasn't loud. It wasn't explosive. It was something quieter, more uncomfortable, more real. And if you watched it unfold, if you felt that tension, that pause where no one quite knew what to say next, then you were inside it too. Now we want to hear from you. Was Mark Ruffalo being unfairly pushed, or was Whoopi right to challenge him? Did the conversation go too far, or not far enough? Share your thoughts in the comments, and if you want more cinematic, emotional breakdowns of the most intense moments in pop culture and television, make sure you subscribe to Talk Narrative. Because the real story doesn't end when the interview does.